Hi everyone, this is Fernando from AbyssalBrews, and in this video I'm going to talk about the illustration process or edge of Alacrity. I'm going to start by showing you the earliest stages of concepting for this item, the stuff that is not meant for public consumption. I think some people might want to see that, and I want everyone to see and understand just how loose and rough the initial stages of illustration are. Sometimes these rough sketches are short of stick figures, and that's fine. The goal is to visually convey an idea, not to make it look polished and beautiful. Not every item is created the same. Most of the time Matt comes up with the concept, name, stats, etc. Sometimes he also has an idea of what the item should look like. Some other times he leaves it completely up to me. Either way, there's always some back and forth between us, and the final product benefits from that conversation. This magical halberd is all about speed and movement, so right away I knew I wanted to convey that visually. You'll see that the initial idea never changed much. It's always different iterations of the same concept. I wanted the blade to look like it's always in motion, even when it's resting on a weapon rack. Once Matt and I agree on the final look, I do a drawing with cleaner lines. I'm usually sending him progress pictures as I go along, and you'll notice that at one point I started laying down the flag colors, and then I went back to drawing. That's because Matt mentioned that the handle looked too plain. He was right, so I spent some time making it more intricate and interesting to look at. Then I started coloring again. Every element on the blade part is triplicated to give the illusion of motion. I have no idea if something like this is even possible to forge, but that's not the point. I'm not concepting ideas for an actual blacksmith. They're not supposed to make sense or be viable weapons. They're mostly supposed to look cool while keeping within the parameters of reasonable functionality. I think it's important to not be bound by the rules of the real world. After all, these are epic magic items in an amazing fantasy world where anything is possible. While the blade has trails to our right, the pommel at the bottom has trails to our left. I figure this makes it seem like it's twirling, as if thrown like a giant tomahawk. The bird etched on the blade adds to the symbolism of speed, and the feathers it's shedding both convey velocity and act as a nice transition into the spell effect, a slipstream of ethereal feathers in the wake of the weapon. Here I started the painting/rendering process. This is the most fun part of every illustration for me. The first thing I did was bring in the background. That way I'm choosing colors for the shadows and highlights based on the environment. It's important not to choose your colors with a white background. The brightness of a white background will make you think that colors are darker than they are, and usually you'll end up choosing a brighter palette than you intended. I like to do the background first, and if what I'm working on is not meant to have a background because it's a web graphic or a decal, then I make sure to work over a nice neutral gray. You'll see a quick glimpse of a spark trail in a second. This is when I started experimenting with the spell effect. I tried a few of Procreate's brushes, but then I decided to just make my own since it's really easy to do. I'm including the drawing of the brush shape for those who are curious. It's quick, I promise. I didn't spend much time on these feathers since it's for a spell effect and the details will be lost anyway. I remember I did this at the waiting room in my doctor's office. Coincidentally, he happens to have a bunch of dream catchers in his patient's rooms, so I was able to use the feathers on them as a reference for this brush. Using Google Images for references is fine, but nothing beats a real-life object in person. By the way, Google Images is okay, but I learned from Anthony Jones that Pinterest is a much better place for finding reference images. And since it lets you group your images, it's a very useful tool for any illustrator. Regardless, whether it's a web page, web images, real life, or pictures in a magazine, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have references for your artwork. It doesn't matter at what skill level you are, every professional artist uses references. Everyone should. It makes your end product better 100% of the time. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a comment or contact us through social if there's something in particular you'd like me to talk about in these videos. And if you like what we're putting out there, maybe like and subscribe. Or not. We just want you to be happy.